You ever get that gut feeling that something's about to go wrong, even though everything looks normal on the outside? That's exactly what it felt like the morning the HOA decided to flip the switch. They said it was routine maintenance, but no emails, no letters, no knocks on doors, no backup plans. It was mid-January, the coldest week of winter, frost still clinging to rooftops, kids wrapped up in blankets, and heaters humming just to keep the chill away. I was sipping coffee by the window, watching the thin layer of snow glitter in the pale sunrise, when it happened. A sudden silence. Then, the hum of the fridge died, the heater stopped, the lights went out, and the entire street fell quiet, like the world had been muted in an instant. My neighbor, Tom, stepped outside in his slippers, rubbing his arms, eyes squinting in confusion. "Your power out too," he called across the street. I nodded, holding my phone. No notifications, no alerts. And that's when the texts started flooding in on the neighborhood group chat. "Anyone else's power dead? I have a newborn at home. What's happening? My mom is on oxygen. Does anyone know what's going on?" Minutes turned into hours. People bundled up in layers, huddling near fireplaces, clutching coffee cups, trying to keep warm. But across the street, in the little blue house with the red shutters, the Thompsons had a backup generator. They had saved for it after the last blackout, determined never to be caught off guard again. But no one, not even them, knew the generator had a hidden fault. At first, it was a faint smell, like something burning far away. Then, a flicker of smoke curling into the icy sky. I remember seeing Mrs. Thompson, her face pale, clutching her toddler, looking back at the house as black smoke poured out of the side vent. Tom yelled, "Call 911, but it was too late. Flames burst through the side of the house, licking the sky, crackling like dry paper in a bonfire. Neighbors ran to help, but the roads were iced over, cars frozen, and without power, no one could open garage doors or move vehicles. It was chaos. And the worst part, the HOA nowhere to be seen. Not a single board member came out, not a single official called to residents. No support, no plan, no explanation. They were the ones who cut the power, but they were hiding while a family's home was burning to the ground. And as the fire trucks finally fought through the icy roads, hoses spraying steam into the cold air, the truth started to spread through the neighborhood like a second fire. The HOA had caused this. They flipped the switch without warning. They put every family in danger. They had blood on their hands, whether they were ready to admit it or not. But this was only the beginning, because what started as a silent morning with coffee in hand was about to become the biggest community fight this HOA had ever seen. People were angry, families were scared, neighbors wanted answers. And the HOA, they were about to panic. Because when the fire went out, the real heat was just getting started. The next morning, the smell of smoke still clung to the air. Ashes from the Thompsons' house drifted onto driveways like black snow. Everyone was shaken and angry, but the HOA, they tried to play it cool. Emails finally arrived hours too late, saying it was scheduled maintenance. For your safety, minor inconvenience. They called the fire an unfortunate incident, as if a child losing her home was just a minor hiccup in their HOA newsletter. I watched neighbors gather at the end of the street that morning. Gloves on, breath fogging in the cold air, everyone clutching coffee cups, eyes red from a sleepless night. Tom was there, pacing. Mrs. Hernandez was there, holding her phone with photos of the flames still pulled up, shaking her head in disbelief. And then there was me, trying to keep my own anger from boiling over. We all knew who was responsible, but as the day went on, something even uglier started to surface. The HOA president, Karen, showed up at the cul-de-sac with her clipboard, sunglasses hiding her eyes, acting like nothing happened. She told people they were overreacting. She claimed, The HOA can't be held liable for accidents during maintenance. She even had the audacity to say, this wouldn't have happened if people had prepared better. Neighbors started shouting back, you didn't tell us. You cut the power without warning. My kid had hypothermia because of you. Karen's fake calm slipped. Her hands trembled. She stepped back as the crowd grew louder. And then, she made the worst mistake. She threatened fines. She told Tom his snow-covered driveway was a hazard. She told Mrs. Hernandez her wreath was against HOA decor policy. Right there, standing in front of the charred remains of a family's home, she was handing out violation threats. That's when people snapped. Phones came out recording every word Karen said. Neighbors started live streaming on Facebook, TikTok, anywhere they could. The HOA mask was slipping. And the world was watching. A reporter from the local news arrived, camera rolling, asking questions Karen clearly wasn't ready to answer. Why was there no notice of a power cut? What emergency planning does your HOA have? Do you accept responsibility for the house fire? Karen stumbled, stuttered, looked around for her board members, but none showed up. She tried to walk away, but people followed, cameras rolling. She got in her car, slammed the door, and sped off, leaving behind a neighborhood in ruins and a PR nightmare that was only getting started. But behind closed doors, the HOA board wasn't planning apologies. They were planning revenge. Emails started going out to homeowners, claiming people were harassing the board. Legal threats followed, defamation, harassment, violation of community standards. They tried to silence the families they endangered, but the neighborhood was done being silent. People started digging, old HOA budgets, meeting notes, emails, and what they found. Karen and her inner circle had spent thousands on administrative expenses, dinners, trips, even spa days, money that should have gone into emergency planning and safety improvements. Instead, it was wasted on vanity projects and personal luxuries. The community was outraged. They demanded answers, receipts, accountability, and while Karen hid, the families came together. Tom, Mrs. Hernandez, the Thompsons, they started organizing. They created a neighborhood watch. They held their own meetings in living rooms, away from the HOA prying eyes. And together, they formed a plan. Because if the HOA wouldn't protect them, they would protect themselves. This wasn't just about the fire anymore. It was about power. It was about trust. It was about taking back their community from the people who betrayed it. And as the sun set that evening, people stood outside, looking at the smoldering remains of the Thompsons' home, fists clenched, jaws set. They were ready to fight back. And the HOA, they were about to find out what happens when you push a neighborhood too far. The neighborhood was quiet for a few days, but it wasn't peace. It was the tension before a storm. The HOA sent out cold, carefully worded emails about community standards and respect for leadership. They tried to act like nothing happened, like they hadn't nearly killed a family with their negligence. Karen stayed hidden behind her gates, only appearing to drive to and from the HOA office, sunglasses on, avoiding eye contact. But the neighborhood wasn't letting this slide. Tom was first to speak out publicly. He posted a video from his driveway, the burned remains of the Thompsons' house in the background. His voice shook, but his message was clear. We trusted them. They failed us. We're not letting them bury this. That video went viral overnight. Local news picked it up. Comments flooded in. People from other HOAs shared their own stories of power abuse and neglect. And the HOA, they panicked. Emails became more aggressive. They threatened fines for improper trash can placement and parking violations for people who had spoken out. They thought fear would silence everyone, but all it did was fuel the fire. Mrs. Hernandez found old budget reports from the HOA website. She highlighted the line items: administrative retreat, board appreciation dinner, miscellaneous expenses. Thousands spent on themselves, while families suffered without proper safety measures. She posted screenshots online with the caption, "Is this where our dues went while the Thompsons lost their home?" The post exploded. Karen tried damage control, claiming it was standard HOA procedure. But no one was buying it anymore. The next HOA meeting was packed. They tried to limit attendance, but neighbors stood outside, recording with their phones, demanding transparency. Karen stood at the front, clutching her clipboard, flanked by her board. People raised their hands to speak. Karen tried to control the room, calling people out of order. But the voices rose, one by one. You lied about the power cut. You endangered our families. You spent our dues on yourself. Karen's face turned red, her lips pursed. She tried to shout down the questions. But then the door opened, and in walked Mr. Thompson, his wife by his side, their faces tired but determined. The room fell silent. They stood in front of everyone, holding up their phone, playing the security camera footage from the night of the fire. The glow of flames on the screen reflected in the shocked faces of the board members. The footage showed the moment the lights went out, the panic, the fire igniting, the screams. And then, the silence of the darkened house as the family escaped into the freezing cold. The room was quiet, heavy with the weight of reality. Mr. Thompson's voice broke the silence. You did this. He looked directly at Karen. You cut the power without warning. You left us in the dark. You left us to burn. Karen tried to speak, but her voice cracked. A board member whispered something, but Karen shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. For the first time, she realized the power she thought she had was gone. Outside, more neighbors gathered, watching through the windows, recording everything. And then Tom stepped forward. He said what everyone was thinking. We're done letting you control us. He handed Karen a stack of papers, a petition, signed by dozens of homeowners, a vote of no confidence, a demand for Karen and her board to resign. Karen's hands shook as she held the papers. She looked around the room, but no one met her gaze. Even the board members beside her stepped back, distancing themselves. The walls were closing in, and outside, the neighborhood was waking up. They realized they didn't need to fear the HOA. They realized they had the power. And that night, as Karen sat alone in her office, staring at the petition, the neighborhood gathered in Tom's garage. They shared coffee, stories, tears. They started planning how to take back their neighborhood, to rebuild trust, to protect each other. It wasn't just about the fire anymore. It was about never letting this happen again. About making sure no family was ever left in the cold while the HOA sat in their warm homes counting their dues. And as the meeting ended, Tom looked around and said, "We're going to finish this." And the neighborhood nodded, united, because this was just the beginning. The next morning, the neighborhood woke up different. A quiet resolve had replaced the fear. Tom's garage had become the heartbeat of the block. Neighbors brought over coffee, folding chairs, and notepads. They listed every violation the HOA had threatened them with, every false fine, every moment of intimidation. They started documenting everything. Screenshots of threatening emails, videos of board members yelling at residents, photos of HOA members at expensive dinners while streets went unrepaired. It was a dossier of arrogance. Karen, meanwhile, was spiraling. She tried to send more threats, but every email was screenshotted and shared in the neighborhood group chat. People who had once cowered now laughed at her attempts to regain control. Then came the town hall. The county commissioner was there. Local news cameras lined the back of the room. Karen arrived in her crisp suit, trying to project confidence, clutching her clipboard like a shield. But her eyes were darting. She saw the cameras. She saw the family she had fined and threatened. She saw Mr. Thompson, the man whose home had burned, standing beside Tom and Mrs. Hernandez. The commissioner called the meeting to order. Karen tried to take control, but the commissioner raised a hand. Today is about accountability. The footage played again, the power outage. The flames, the screams. Karen's face turned pale. The commissioner read out loud the list of HOA expenditures. Thousands spent on leadership retreats. Thousands on holiday bonuses. All while safety measures were ignored. The crowd murmured, anger rising. Karen tried to defend herself, saying it was standard HOA procedure. But the commissioner interrupted. Standard procedure nearly killed a family. Karen's voice cracked. It was a routine shutoff. You didn't notify anyone. Karen's lips trembled. It wasn't my fault. It was your responsibility. Silence fell. Karen looked around the room, searching for support. But her board members looked away. Then Tom stood. We're taking a vote. The neighbors raised their hands one by one. No confidence. Removal of the entire board. A demand for an independent audit of the HOA finances. The commissioner nodded. It's done. Karen's clipboard fell from her hands, hitting the floor with a sharp crack. Papers scattered. Her power was gone. As she was escorted from the meeting, cameras followed. Neighbors outside cheered quietly, hugging each other, tears of relief in their eyes. Mr. Thompson shook Tom's hand. Thank you. Tom smiled. No, thank you for surviving, for reminding us what matters. The neighborhood moved forward. They formed a new committee made up of residents who cared. They installed proper safety measures. They created a real emergency alert system for the neighborhood. They cut unnecessary spending and lowered dues. The burned house was rebuilt, neighbors volunteering to help with repairs. Mr. Thompson and his family returned home to a freshly painted door, flowers planted by neighbors, and a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home." Winter ended and spring came. Children played in the yards again. Neighbors shared meals, stories, and laughter. Trust was rebuilt, stronger than before, because they learned that community isn't about fear and control. It's about looking out for each other. It's about standing up when something is wrong. It's about never letting arrogance and power hurt families again. Tom, sitting on his porch one evening, watched the sunset over the street. He sipped his coffee and smiled. They had taken back their neighborhood, and it all started because they refused to stay silent, because they chose courage over fear, and because they remembered, power belongs to the people who care.